Last year, one of the recipients of ATA's Change Leader Award was the Atlas World Group, and it was honored for its work in developing a modern comprehensive DEI training course. So I'm talking today to Kelly Cruse, Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Diversity Officer for Atlas. So Kelly, welcome.
Welcome. Good morning.
So the ATA Award, let's kind of start off and talk about that and that training program. I guess, why are diversity training programs like that important, and how did you develop it? What does it include? Just tell us all about it.
Yeah, so we pulled together a program by partnering with the University of Evansville. They have a Center for Diversity there on campus, and Dr. Valerie Stein was our primary trainer. She partnered with us in pulling together the content, and it really focused mostly on implicit bias. So we really wanted to take it away from just the traditional, like, let's talk about each specific term in DEI, right? We wanted to really focus on kind of what we can do internally to recognize, do we have bias, right? Like, how do we recognize our bias? How do we kind of hit that pause button, right? And think, wait a minute, is that real or is that bias? And just giving people kind of the tools in the workplace to take that moment to pause so that we can understand where the others are coming from, and we can work together as a team and bring together all of our great talent in one, and don't let bias hold us back from working together. So that was the primary focus of the training. We did put all of our employees through the training at all levels with all of our subsidiaries. We held it live here in Evansville, but we also did video training as well for people who were in remote locations or in other locations.
What are some of the ways that you get that message across? We all have, we all see things through our own lens of our own experience, and how do you kind of get that conversation going to help people try to see through other people's eyes, I guess?
Right. So Dr. Stein pulled together some activities that we pulled together, some worksheets that really worked through some questions where you were rating, do you have positive or negative feelings on certain things when you hear a word? Let's say if you saw the word crickets, right? Is crickets positive or is it negative? We all have a different version of that word, based on our own, do we like bugs or do we not like bugs? And so, I mean, that sounds so simple, but you'd go through this exercise and you'd realize, like, oh, my first thought on that might not have been what somebody else's first thought on that is. So my beliefs are different than somebody else's. And, it kind of took that exercise and built on that as we went. She also provided some really great real world examples of how you tie that in. I just flew back from Tucson very late last night. I arrived back in my house at 12:30 in the morning.
Oh, goodness.
And this example reminded me of her example in the training. She said, when you get on a flight and you walk in and you look into the cockpit, what do you expect to see when you walk onto the plane, right? And everybody, in full honesty, right, they're raising their hand and they're telling you what they expect the person to look like. A lot of people expected to be a man, right? That was always everybody's first reaction. And usually they expected them to be a white man. And so it wasn't that was wrong, right? It was just their bias. That's what they had experienced. So then she took it one step further and she said, okay, so how did that make you feel if you look to the left and you see a woman pilot, or if you see a person of color in the pilot seat? And it just kind of challenged people's initial reaction to say, okay, was that if I saw that, is that positive or is that make me nervous, right? And so it just helped. Everybody has that experience. I guess not everybody's probably flown, but for the most part, everybody's been on an airplane. And it takes you a minute to say, okay, that person is in that seat because they're fully qualified to fly that plane. So regardless of the visual diversity that's sitting in the cockpit, they're all qualified to fly that plane.
In trucking, I guess probably the area that's still most male, it's probably in the shop.
Yes.
I interviewed a young woman, diesel tech, recently, and it was interesting talking about her experiences of customers like, this tiny little 20-year-old is working on, big trucks and excavators and everything else. And, she's like, hey, it's, I I have some advantages. I can get into some tight spaces that my male counterparts can't.
Exactly. I mean, she brings something to the table, right? And that's the thing. We're looking at areas of the workforce that do tend to attract mostly men, for example. She's experiencing the workplace very different than everybody else. And how do we? She's probably bringing new perspectives and she's bringing different talents. So how do we bring other people into that technical position? And how do we attract people to that job? How do we get more of that to broaden that experience?
Could you see a difference after the training in how people interacted or people's attitudes? What were the results?
So what I noticed is people were more willing to have the conversations, right? They started thinking about, okay, their first thought was always diversity was visual diversity, right? It's what somebody looks like, what I can see on the outside. And I think for the first time they realized it wasn't just about visual diversity. It's really about just people's life experience, right? And what you take with you each day and how you look at the world. Everybody has a different perspective based on what kind of how their background is, right? So, I'm a mom, so I bring that with me. I'm a woman, I bring that with me. I grew up in the Midwest, so that I bring kind of that Midwest culture with me. But somebody else may be very different, and looking at something doesn't mean that their perspective's wrong. It just means that it might be different than mine. And how does that bring something to work? How do we work together more that way? And I noticed that those conversations started to occur more often, like, oh, maybe that's not that they're wrong. Let's talk through it, so people would kind of have that discussion. And then it also sparked additional discussions around just DEI in general. We continued that from the training. We moved into some listening sessions where we talked to people about diversity in the workplace and what we could do more. And people just, it opened up the ability to have those conversations. People were a little nervous to have them before. It's a sticky topic. Nobody wants to be offensive. They don't want to step on any toes or say the wrong thing. So it kind of gave everybody that freedom to have the discussions and openly discuss DEI in the workplace and what that means at Atlas.
Your drivers don't have time to waste time going off route, rerunning a fuel card that won't authorize, or sitting on hold for support. That's where multi-service fuel card comes in. Trusted for more than 45 years, we provide the broadest truck stop network, fuel discounts, and 24/7 customer service that never leaves you hanging. Learn more at neverrollalone.com.
And I guess that kind of gets to question that was next on my list. Like, all right, so you were named to Chief Diversity Officer. It was a new position in January of 2022. And you told the Indiana Business Journal in an interview that one of the first things you did was making sure the executive leadership team understood the updated view of DEI. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about here, where the view of diversity and inclusion programs has changed. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so first of all, Jack Griffin, our CEO, his focus on DEI is really what led to creating the position of the Chief Diversity Officer role. Before we hadn't gone down that path and created the position, so it was really just highlighting his commitment to DEI at Atlas. And where we went from there then is we still partner with U of E on this process as well. She came in and worked with our executive team. I thought it was important to bring in somebody who their primary focus in their profession is DEI. She brings a different type of credibility on that. But I also like that she was in the academic world, right? So she worked for the local university. And so she could talk through DEI on that side. We could talk through different various groups. We could talk through different cultures, what DEI really is, kind of what people are experiencing in the world. She's a true expert in that. And what it provided then is it opened everybody's eyes to, okay, so it's not just, is it gender or is it race? It's not an affirmative action plan. That's not really what we're talking about when we talk about DEI now. DEI is really more about belonging. It's about creating a workplace where people can bring their whole self, their true self, right, to the workplace and feel comfortable at work. And so we had to set the tone with the executive team first to make sure that they understood what is DEI and that they were talking about it in the way that is the current focus, right? It is on belonging and inclusion. And so we provided them with the tools and the background to be able to have those conversations and get their commitment and buy-in to continue to roll that down through the organization. Because if they didn't support it, it was really just an exercise, right? We had to make sure that it was in the heart of who we are.
Yeah, and sometimes I have obviously DEI's kind of gotten in the news a lot lately. I think kind of gotten a bad rap because I think people do think of it as it's affirmative action, or it's maybe some companies it hasn't worked well because it was just sort of going through the motions of, oh, we got to have a DEI program, as opposed to that really being part of the company culture.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I think that DEI has, for some reason, just the term has been taken and turned into something negative, right? But
Yeah.
if you break it down and you look at what is DEI and what companies are doing to focus on DEI, it's all positive things. Our focus has always been on inclusion. It's always been on how do we find the brightest and most capable employees to come together, because we want a strong workforce. So how do we make an environment where that attracts people to us? How do we make sure, I mean, we have diverse customers. How do we make sure we're meeting our customers' needs? And if we put everybody in a room and we're all the same and we're all cookie cutter, we're not going to meet the needs of our customers. We're not going to be able to address the needs of our employees. So, yes, DEI has gotten a bad rep, but I will tell you, oh goodness, I've been working in HR now for 23 or 24 years. I've never worked for a company that looked at it from a strictly numbers perspective or a lessening standards perspective. We've always focused on how do we make the best place for all employees so that they can come and be the most productive. It's always been a positive focus. It's just unfortunate that has been turned into a negative, because DEI it's critical to a business success, really.
Yeah, it's if you're not, I guess, making some of these efforts to make sure everybody is welcome, then you may end up overlooking some of the best people for the position, or they may not want to be there, or they might not want to stay there if they don't feel welcome.
Absolutely. We all bring different strengths, and those strengths come in different packages, right? And so if we're going to overlook somebody based on, some trait that they have, we're missing out on some of the best people that would make our company better.
So beyond sort of looking, I guess, at the definition and the training, what are some of the ways that the company had started improving its diversity and inclusion efforts? Give some examples of some things that you've done.
So one of the great things that came out of our executive sessions is we always had a different policy around our sick leave, and so everybody would accrue sick leave. But if, for instance, if somebody was going out to give birth, if they didn't have accrued sick leave, it was unpaid time. It was through FMLA. It was unpaid time. We didn't have maternity leave or any type of parental leave that was formal. And the group was just assumed that the sick leave covered that, right? When we explained that, no, that's not how this works unless somebody's kind of accrued that time. So that means somebody who's new to the organization or somebody had used their sick leave for a different purpose, they may not have the time to be off from paid perspective, right? They could be off unpaid, which is great. It's just, I think we should be the type of employer that's paying for that, right? And they were very open to say, you know what, we really need to find a way to make sure that we're providing paid maternity leave. So we ended up implementing short-term disability, but they were like, wait, let's go a little bit farther than that. All parents, not just the parent who gave birth, should have some time off. So we added some parental leave hours as well for all parents when they had a newborn. So for birth or adoption of a child. So it was really not just let's make sure we're doing one thing right. It was let's make sure we're being inclusive of the entire population. So if somebody is giving birth, whether it's the one parent or the other, they have time to be home with their child and have some paid time off. That was the first step. And then we also it caused people to look around our building as well. And our buildings, it's of an age that certain requirements under the ADA were not required when the building was built. And so we really hadn't gone back through and looked at the building through the lens of somebody who might be differently abled and might have a different experience coming into our building. And the first thing we realized is some of our doors were not as accessible as they should be. So we went back and we did some construction to add the handicap accessible buttons within the front doors to make it easier to get through the building. And we made sure that there was additional parking at all of our entrances because our workforce has kind of moved around the buildings. And at one point, most people were going in a different door. And we realized there wasn't enough parking for everybody that might need extra help getting into the building. So they arranged all of that. And it just took that moment to think through what could we be doing differently to make this better for people, to look at the building and say, hey, you know what, we should be doing that. We also created a better space for people who are breastfeeding. So we created a space. Before, it was in kind of a dark space. It wasn't inviting. It wasn't relaxing. And anybody who's needed one of those spaces would quickly recognize that that was not going to be the easiest space. So it was great. We ended up being able to create a space that had natural light. It had comfortable furniture. It had all, refrigerator and anything that would be needed, just to create kind of that space that was much more accommodating for somebody who needed that area. We've also had, I think I mentioned we did some DEI listening sessions. Those were wonderful. Like, it was one of my favorite things that I've done since I've been here. So after we finished our training, it was all voluntary. We just sent out a message that said anybody that would like to talk through DEI in a broader scale, we're going to come in. We're just going to ask some questions and let you guys talk. So, what can we be doing more of? What should we be doing less of? Are there things we're not aware of that could change? And people shared some really, really positive feedback and ideas of what we could do. Something as simple as they really like outside speakers. How can we bring in some outside speakers? So we're like, how do we bring in speakers, but not always have to pay a significant dollar amount, because then it just limits what we can do. So we got a little creative and we're like, you know what? There are a lot of people in our community who are supporting diverse groups that our group might not know about. So we looked in our community to reach out to say, who could we bring in locally that could speak on maybe an organization that they're supporting. So it would bring attention to the organization, but it would also allow us to bring in an outside speaker. So we brought in a few individuals, and it was, like I said, not just visual diversity. We looked at Wesselman Woods locally. It's one of the largest, I hope I get this right, largest urban forests in the country here in Evansville, Indiana. So if you think about neurodiversity, or you think about just different backgrounds, maybe somebody grew up in a city and never had exposure to a forest, or vice versa. Maybe they were always in an area that was more rural, and they end up in a city and they don't even know that we have this wonderful urban forest. So we brought that group in. We have the African American History Museum here locally. We brought speakers in from the museum, and then also provided free tickets for people to go visit the museum. So we just looked at different ways to bring in not just DEI, but also kind of that community support when it was possible.
Yeah, I think on the forest, there's been research in recent years that it's really good for your mental health to get out in nature.
Yes, absolutely. So we also do a lot around wellness too. So it fit both, like, let's bring in people that can speak about anything in our community that would just make employees' lives better, right? And so wellness is a big piece of it. And then again, if you think about, we have people who their mind works differently, and sometimes the hum and buzz of the office or other locations, just it's harder for them. So, providing, hey, we have a resource out here locally. Do you know we have this wonderful urban forest? You can get out in nature for a little bit, maybe reconnect, and then after you've done that, you can be back and focus on what you need to do, and just kind of providing options, basically.
Some of those listening sessions get into people, again, sort of sharing what things were like from their perspective, from their, as a woman or a neurodiverse person or a handicapped person or just somebody from a different background, that helped other people kind of understand that experience.
Absolutely. People shared some very personal things during these sessions. I was very happy with people feeling comfortable enough to share their personal experience. One individual, I'll share, she shared that English was not her first language. And so, although she was very fluent in English, so, and everybody knew that she did not grow up here. Was very open and shared that with everybody. But we didn't realize how sometimes difficult maybe it was when nobody else in our organization spoke her primary language. And her manager was in the same session and heard her say that, and he went out and took it upon himself to learn her native language, which was Spanish. Obviously, very very early stages of learning the language, and then from that session, continued to work with her, and the two of them would try to speak together so that he would learn her language. He wanted to meet her where she was, and I guess that was one of those moments where you're like, that is so wonderful that somebody else is sharing their experience. And it just so happened that her leader was in that session, and heard that and really took that to heart. And I love sharing that story because it just shows that, we all learn from somebody else. And this experience was something that he's like, oh, maybe I should learn, why not? Why not take that upon myself to meet somebody where they are and make them feel more comfortable?
So we tend to make assumptions based on our own experiences. Well, she's fluent in English, so wouldn't necessarily think that was an issue,
Right.
without sharing that and thinking about, oh, wow, yeah, that would be kind of tough.
And it's such a great example of why DEI is important at the leadership level. So if you think about it, what that employee would have felt like to know that her manager thought highly enough of her to take time on his personal time to learn her primary language. Like that's the type of relationship that it connects you back to not only your manager but the organization as a whole, because you feel valued, right?
We mentioned a little bit about DEI being in the news a lot, confusion. Some companies, I guess, have backed off a little bit. From sort of the broader HR perspective, kind of what are you hearing in that world as to what companies are doing?
So I think most of us in the HR world, we're all just kind of like, what? Oh, let's hold our breath. Let's see what's going on, because you don't know what's coming next, right? It feels like there's this constant kind of attack on DEI in the workplace. So we were a little afraid, which way do you go? What do you do? Are we going to have to remove some of our programs? Some of these executive orders really require federal contractors to make some changes moving forward. And so there's this collective kind of, all right, do we need to make changes? Can we continue what we're doing? It's this up and down roller coaster. But I will tell you, here at Atlas, and with other companies that are like us, right? DEI was kind of part of who we are. It was about the inclusion. It was about belonging. So nothing that we have been doing violates anything that the executive orders have pushed back on. So, we've never set quotas. We're not doing anything that discriminates against anybody. Really, what we're doing is just trying to make a workplace that is conducive to doing the best, right? We want to attract and retain the best talent. So everything we're doing, we don't have to step back on. We're talking about how do we be more inclusive? How do we make sure that we have people that are collaborating across all groups? How do we make sure that our policies are inclusive? Those are all the things that if the company truly had DEI at its core and truly believed in what they were working on, those things don't go away. We have a CEO who's very focused on what we're doing and committed to it. Some companies, unfortunately, are sitting in a position where they feel pressured to make changes that maybe aren't in their best interest as an organization. So I feel like we're in a good spot, but unfortunately, some HR people are in an organization that don't have that. I will tell you, we had employees reach out to us and say, "Are we going to have to make changes? Are we going to have to stop doing our DEI work?" And I was so fortunate to be able to answer, "No, we're continuing." They were very happy to hear that we still had the commitment to do that.
Being in the trucking industry, is there anything about our industry in particular that makes any DEI programs any different?
You have to think about, the world is diverse, right? Our entire country is diverse. So From our industry, we have diverse customers, we have diverse employees, our agents have diverse employees. So for us, it's really just making sure that, we do continue to make the place, our workplace, inclusive, because that's going to better meet our customers' need. And in the end, that's really what we're looking to do, right? We want to be a company that's making our customers happy. And if we don't have that diverse thought, it doesn't occur. So I think it's more of what we're currently doing, right? It's continuing opportunities around learning. It's creating a safe space for people to provide ideas and then see us execute those ideas, like our short-term disability plan and our, handicap accessibility from a building perspective. It's those types of things that if we create an environment where people are willing to bring those ideas forward and then see us execute on those, that's what's going to continue to propel us forward.
We're heading into Women's History Month. And speaking of trucking, personally, I've seen a lot change in the 30 years I've been in the industry. We've, I think, made a lot of progress, but there's still some things that need some work. There are a couple of initiatives. There's Women in Trucking Association. There's ATA's Women in Motion Council. What are you seeing there? What are some ways that are you involved in any of those programs? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely work in an industry from a gender perspective that it is historically more male, correct? Right. And so it's really around making sure for us, we look for people who have the right, there's skills that you can train and skills that you have to have entering the job, right? So when we're looking at that, we're trying to make sure that we're attracting people that have the skills today to make you successful, but the stuff that can be trained, let's bring people in. Let's make sure on the job training, making sure that there's accessibility. We try to reach out to diverse groups when we hire women included, right? So we're going to career fairs, trying to bring that diverse perspective. We also internally, we look at, are we paying competitively across the board? Are we make sure that we're, none of our practices are discriminatory, trying to make sure that we're removing any barriers so that women can continue to move up within the organization and make impacts. I know I'm personally not involved in those organizations, but I do know that we have members in our organization who participate. We have some very strong women leaders in our organization, and I think that helps us also. So you're starting to see how when we have strong leaders in our organization, what kind of that is doing and broadening the perspectives.
All right, great. That covers, I think, the questions I had. Any other thoughts or advice that we haven't talked about?
I mean, for me, when people ask me, what does this mean for you, right? They know that my title includes DEI. I would love for everybody in my position to have the same feeling of comfort that I have, right? I know our executive team is supportive of continuing these initiatives, whether in the long run it's called DEI or it's called inclusion or belonging, and you can call it whatever it is. The important part is that we're creating an environment where the best and the brightest can work here and feel comfortable coming to work.
You want to be a successful business, having people who are a strong team, that really, you need that. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us to talk about diversity in trucking.
It was a pleasure. I love talking about it.
I know. So you said in your LinkedIn profile, I can't remember exactly how you had worded it, but also that you said it was and having a high performing team.
Absolutely.
So again, that back to that whole, it's not just about DEI, or it's about having this company, this team, making sure you've got the best people and that they work together well, and so the company can be successful, the people can be successful.
Yes. And diverse exposures and diverse experiences, when people bring those to the team, that truly is at the heart of what makes a high-performing team. We're all looking at how do we approach whatever problem we're facing from a different perspective, and you're going to see all angles when you have people with diverse backgrounds looking at the same problem. So that really is at the core of a high-performing team.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
I've been talking to Kelly Cruse with the Atlas World Group. For more trucking news and insights, visit truckinginfo.com and subscribe to our newsletters or HTT magazine. And don't forget to subscribe to HTT Talks Trucking on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode.